All right, by now everybody knows Monday's breaking news. Brian Daboll is out. Joe Schoen has been retained as GM, and Mike Kafka is going to take over as interim head coach. What's up, guys? Brandon London here alongside longtime Giants beat writer for the Post, Paul Schwartz. Paul, what's up? What's going on, my man? We both were kind of tied up with the traveling back to New York yesterday when all of the news dropped. Where were you when you found out, and what were your initial thoughts when you found out that Brian Daboll was out?
Brandon, hello. I'm trying to think of my geography to think where I was. Maybe I was over, I don't know, Des Moines. I don't know. Maybe the Pittsburgh Allegheny area, I guess. Yeah, I was flying back from Chicago. As anyone who traveled this weekend, very difficult travel situations with, the stoppages and things like that and delays. So yes, I covered another loss in Chicago. Hard to believe, but not hard to believe. And so we'll break it down. Yeah, and so certainly not shocked. We've done this a lot, Brandon. These Blue Rush podcasts, and after a bunch of them, we maybe not speculated about someone being fired, but it's certainly we talked about a lot of losses, and when you talk about a lot of losses, this is the inevitable next step.
20, 40, and 1 as head coach. And let's kind of just go through what Brian Daboll did and somewhat what he didn't do as head coach. Paul, he came in 2022 and he just completely just took over the city. I'm talking 9-7-1 record. They went to the playoffs. That first game, he captured the fan base's heart and trust when you go for it on a 2-point conversion. You get it with Saquon Barkley. You're playing Biggie Smalls is juicy in the locker room, smoking cigars. You get branded as Brian Daboll's, and then it all just went downhill from there. 6-11 in 2023, 3-14, and then we have a 2-8 start to the 2025 season. How did you hear, or what do you know about how it all went down? When do you think ownership and management kind of made that decision to where it was like, okay, it's now time to move on?
Very recently, I mean, this is certainly, I don't know, say been brewing, but look, the record is the record. The terrible losses are the terrible losses. So after Steve Tisch, one of the Giants co-owners, was in Chicago for the game. John Mara was not. He is not making all these road trips because he is in cancer treatment. So John Mara was home. Steve Tisch was at the game. I saw Steve Tisch go into the locker room afterwards. So Monday morning, Steve Tisch and John Mara had a phone conversation. Okay, John from the office, Steve Tisch from, I believe, probably West Coast, I would imagine. They had a phone conversation, and in that conversation, it was agreed upon that they were going to and needed to make a change at the head coach position, not at the general manager position, but at the head coach position. After that phone conversation, John Mara and called Joe Schoen into his office and said, "This is what we are doing. You're staying. Brian Daboll is leaving, and Mike Kafka is going to be the interim head coach." That was a decision made by ownership, not by Joe Schoen. Okay, so anyone who says Joe Schoen won a power struggle here, Joe Schoen did not fire Brian Daboll. The owners fired Brian Daboll. After that, John Mara and, with Steve Tisch on the line, called in Brian Daboll and informed him they were making a move and he was no longer going to be the Giants head coach. This is the harsh reality of it. And then the Giants had a regularly scheduled 1 p.m. team meeting. At that team meeting, Joe Schoen led the meeting and announced to the team that there was a coaching change and Brian Daboll was no longer the head coach and Mike Kafka was now the interim head coach. Mike Kafka then spoke to the team for the first time as the head coach. From what I understand, he said it was a very difficult day, that he was there because of Brian Daboll. Many of the players were there because of Brian Daboll, bringing them in and coaching them and things like that. They had to move on. There was great opportunity in these last 7 games, and they had to stick together. Brian Daboll was not in that team meeting, did not address the team as a group. He was in the locker room afterwards, talking quietly, privately, individually with some players, yes, including Jaxson Dart. And away we go. That's the way it went down.
Again, I always bring this up as a son of a former head coach who's been fired, as a player who has been a part of regimes where they've had to move on if they fired a coach. I just look at this as the business side of things. I love Brian Daboll, love the conversations that we would have in the cafeteria, love this offense. But at the end of the day, it's a business, Paul, and we talked about the numbers. Why, I don't know why from 2022 he wasn't able to sustain the success that he had in that first year. But there are a lot of fans, when you look at the timeline and you look at the group chats that you're in with some of the fan groups and all out there, there are a lot of people that are split on why Brian Daboll was fired and Joe Schoen retained. You have been all over this regime, covering them from day one. What was it? What would you think were the factors that led ownership to say, hey, we're going to keep Joe Schoen and let Brian Daboll go?
Yeah, I wrote in the New York Post last week. It was election day, and we had a back page of split ticket, and that they are not a package deal, which I was always led to believe. They're not. It's not. I understand fans' angst over this. They wanted everybody gone. They wanted Shane Bowen gone a month ago. They wanted Brian Daboll gone. They wanted Joe Schoen gone. They wanted Brandon London gone. They probably wanted me gone. They wanted the guys in our technical support gone. They want everybody gone,
Yeah.
right? They want everybody gone. They want the parking attendants gone. I get it. I get it. I'm being facetious, but I get it. The record is the record. It's a terrible record. So they want everybody gone. My best reporting is this, okay, is that ownership feels this is a better roster than 2-8. Okay, a better roster, maybe not an 8-2 roster, but a better roster. And the numbers you mentioned the numbers, right? 20, 40, and 1. They are 2-8. Here, let's break down the numbers a little bit, and this may lead to some of the decision why Joe Schoen stayed and Brian Daboll was fired. Is that they were 2-8 for 3 consecutive seasons, right? This is the 3rd straight season. And in those seasons, everyone was watching to see we're spiraling down here. How does the head coach get at us out of it? And in all 3 of those years, he has not been able to do this, as we don't know what's going to happen. Now from 2-8, there was no sense that he could get them out of that spiral after the last 2 years of not getting them out of that spiral. As you know, as a son of a head coach, it's not all on the head coach, but it has to be on the head coach. The record is assigned to a head coach. That's just the way it is. Another thing, the biggest damning number of all is this: 0-4, Brandon. 0-4 in road games this season, where they had a double digit, a 10-point or larger lead in the fourth quarter, 4 times on the road, in Dallas, in New Orleans, in Denver, in Chicago. They had the lead, sometimes in Dallas and in Denver, in the closing minute of regulation, and did not win the game. That can happen sometimes in a season. It cannot happen all 4 times you're in that situation. So I think this particular game in Chicago, when they had a double-digit lead in the fourth quarter and did not hold it, fans, you've spoken to them, they've texted you on social media and interactions. They were like, we saw it coming. We knew it was going to happen. They blew it again. We had no faith in them holding that lead in Chicago. And I think when fans are thinking that, ownership is thinking some of that. And so that was the most damning thing. Clearly, ownership thinks that, and look, Joe Schoen, he's going into the last year of his contract. He'll have to get some kind of modest extension because he is leading the search for the next head coach. You can't bring in head coaching candidates and say to Joe Schoen, what is your contract status? Oh, I'm going into my lame duck year in 2026. And the candidate's going to say, well, why the hell am I going to sign here to be your head coach if you may be gone in a year and then I'm floating in the wind here? So they'll give him, but this is not going to be a lifetime appointment. His job analysis will be done after the season. There will be checks, there will be minuses, pluses, minuses. I guarantee you. Joe Schoen is not going to be anointed king of the Giants here by any stretch of the imagination. He has had a lot of misses. Part of the reason for this firing is on Joe Schoen and his picks and his signings. There is no question about it. It's on a lot of people. It is on Joe Schoen as well, but ownership decided this is not a 2-8 team, and that here's the last thing I'll say on that, Brandon, is that you can say, okay, the roster is what it is, right? In the fourth quarter of these games, they had a double-digit lead with this roster. So at some point in those games with this roster, the head coach and the defensive coordinator and the offensive coordinator and all the support staff have to figure out a way to win some of those four games. One of them, two of them, one of them might have been able to save them. If he won the game in Chicago on Sunday,
Yeah.
maybe they say, okay, it's a stay of execution. I think it would have been. I don't think they would have fired him then. But the Denver game, then how did they respond to that? They lost at home. Then they have a lead in Chicago and they lose. It was too much for the ownership to bear. And they looked at it and said, this is not a roster strength or weakness issue. This is the fact that for whatever reason, this head coach can't get us to finish these games. And that was it.
Bill Parcells said, what, the GM buys the groceries. It's up to the head coach to go out there and cook it. And I think we can all agree, and not to point fingers or anything, but again, when management is sitting there and they're talking about this, the business side of it, the groceries were there. And it's up to the head coach to put the final cherry on top or whatever and close those games out. So I understand people can look at this roster and be like, well, it doesn't compete with the Chiefs rosters or maybe the Eagles roster. They beat the Eagles. They were in the game against the Chiefs. At one point, it was a one-possession game against the Chiefs. So it's about winning these football games and closing these football games is a head coach's job. And that's just hasn't been done the last couple of years. And you mentioned the players feeling some sort of way because, Brian Daboll brought us in. At the same time, if Brian Daboll brought you in, Joe Schoen brought you in. So I don't know if there's you don't want the players to be in some sort of, where does my loyalty lie? Who you more loyal to, the guy that brought you in or the guy that scouted you and brought you in, or the guy that maybe gave you your first start or gave you your opportunity? But when we talk, a lot of people have been talking about some of Joe Schoen's draft picks. Like let's say a Tay Banks, Paul. 2022, Tay Banks had, 2 interceptions. His rookie year was his best year. After that, they didn't get anything out of him. So is that the GM or is that the coaching staff? And when people say, well, he did well under Wink, the head coach fired Wink Martindale. So it's a whole trickle effect. And, again, I hate the whole pointing fingers, and that's what we're in this business because, again, I look at it as it's on all of us. It's on absolutely all of us. You catch that pass, you don't throw that interception, you're where you need to be in prevent defense, so there's not a deep dig route converted in the back of your head. You're where you need to be as a player, then guys get a stay of execution. Guys get to be around a lot longer. It takes all of us is basically what I'm saying. So there's just so many fingers to point, and it's such a complicated issue. It just sucks that we go from, I remember October 9th, 2022, we're in London, Twickenham Stadium. They come back, beat the Packers. I take this video that goes super viral, million views plus. Joe Schoen, Brian Daboll hugging each other, Dave's coming off. The entire fan base was fired up, Paul. And I think that was the height of it all. And then it just kind of came downhill and unraveled. And it just is what it is. So now that Mike Kafka, Paul, is the interim head coach, 2 things, and I'll just let you run with it. 1, do you think he makes any sort of coaching changes, specifically on the defensive side of the ball? 2, what do you think this means for Jaxson Dart? Because that was Brian Daboll's his guy.
Yeah, let's do the second one first.
Yeah.
Because look, Giant fans, Jaxson Dart is. Look, they didn't make this move for Jaxson Dart. I think people get a little crazy here. There's a couple of just complete misnomers. Joe Schoen didn't draft Jaxson Dart for Brian Daboll. It wasn't. That video from that was released after the draft where Joe Schoen is saying, okay, we checked the boxes. You're good with them, right? You want them. People looked at that and said, well, Schoen wasn't really committed to Jaxson Dart. He just said, you want him? Okay, you want him. So Joe Schoen shouldn't get credit for drafting him. It's nonsense. It's garbage. It's just not true.
Absolutely.
Joe Schoen is not going to trade up into the number 25 pick in the first round of the draft after this whole exhaustive process and say, you know what? I don't love the guy, but if our head coach likes him, so be it. Okay, it's your neck. You want him, fine. The coaches loved him. Daboll loved him. The scouts eventually loved him. The assistant coaches loved him. There's the front office. This was an organizational thing to bring Jaxson Dart here. Everybody loved him, including the head coach, and that's the way it's supposed to work. You love him? Okay, let's see. We love him. You love him. We're going to try to get him. Period. That's it. Joe Schoen gets credit for trading for him. Brian Daboll gets credit for helping mold him and craft him and turn him into the favorite right now to be the offensive rookie of the year. Kudos to Brian Daboll. That was a great connection, it seemed like. So now moving forward with Mike Kafka, look, it's his play caller. They have a good relationship. Jaxson Dart, from what I'm told, he spoke with Brian Daboll yesterday about this. Daboll went over to him. Jaxson Dart handled it professionally. He was not happy about it, but he handled it professionally. Jaxson Dart's 22 years old, but he is wise beyond his years. He understands the business of it. He's answered every question about this possible coaching change very professionally, very maturely. It's not Jimmy Chitwood here. Coach stays, I play, coach goes, I go. That's a movie. Yep. It was a great movie. I loved Hoosiers. I loved it. But that was a movie, and this is reality. So that's the way it works here. Coach, Jaxson Dart says, coach stays, I stay, I play. Coach goes, I play also for the new coach, and that's the way it is. That's the light for the NFL. Fans say, well, why they should have fired Shane Bowen. He was the first one to go. You have 7 games to go here, right? So you have to do things now to put the team in the best position to win some games. So Mike Kafka being the interim head coach makes total sense. He's next in line. He had associate head coach in his resume anyway. I assume he will keep the play calling. Will he give it to Shea Tierney? I highly doubt that. Shea Tierney is the quarterback's coach, has not called plays in the NFL before. So that is a tough load for Mike Kafka. I'm going to call the plays, and I'm going to be the head coach. So, where do you divide your loyalties? Because, you can't just be, let Shane Bowen handle the defense, I'll handle the offense, and, I'll let, the special teams coordinator, Gobi, handle the special teams, and I'll kind of be the head coach, and I'll make the, should we punt or should we go for it decisions too. He wants to be the stand-up guy for the entire room now. That's going to be tough. Mike Kafka's going to have to show a different side of him. And so what sense does it make for him to fire Shane Bowen? I thought in Chicago, Shane Bowen actually called a fine game down the stretch. He mixed up his coverages. He mixed up his protection, his man zone. He showed them different things. As I wrote in the post, Shane Bowen can lead Kayvon Thibodeau to the waters of sacks, but he can't make him drink. Kayvon Thibodeau probably whiffed on 3 sacks in that game. Yeah. Was that bad scheming? No. Kayvon Thibodeau's got to make a darn play and put the quarterback down. An elusive, good running quarterback, a strong running quarterback. So firing Shane Bowen now means that they elevate somebody else to the defensive coordinator. You can't make a lot of changes. Yep. Your father knows. As a former player, you can't make 100 changes in 3 days before you play a game. So Bowen stays with the defense. Kafka stays with the offense. Kafka gets added responsibility, and away we go.
Again, it goes back to the whole players play, coaches coach, and it's funny you bring up the Kayvon thing because it kind of goes back to this whole James Franklin thing. James Franklin, when he was fired from Penn State, the following week, the players are getting off the bus with this "if" shirt. And everybody's like, oh, what does that mean? What does that mean? To me, I'm looking at it like if y'all would have won some top 10 games, you'd still have your head coach. So if you, the player, if you make the catch, you make the sack, then people are not breathing down the neck of your defensive coordinator or your head coach doesn't get fired. I always look at it from that end of it. But now when we talk about Jaxson Dart, what this means for Jaxson Dart and why people were so excited about Brian Dart being the guy for Jaxson Dart. Brian Daboll had Josh Allen from 2018 until 2021. His rookie year, 2018, 2,000 yards. 2019, 3,000. 4,500. His last year with them, 4,400 yards. Last 2 years, he had Josh Allen, 37 touchdowns, 36 touchdowns. 2022 to 2024, because 2025 hasn't been completed yet. Josh Allen, 42, 43, 37. and he took a little hit in terms of for touchdowns. Now he did get league MVP, but I'm wondering the next guy that comes in that gets his hands on Jaxson Dart has to be at least on Brian Daboll's caliber, because if Jaxson Dart takes a step back, then somebody's going to have to answer for that. So Joe Schoen now being the guy that's going to be bringing in the new head coach. Paul, you've been covering this organization for a long time. I think, what is this, the 7th head coach, whether it be interim or a full-time head coach in the last, decade or so. Joe Schoen really has to get this thing right. So since we're always at this point of Blue Rush, we're either always talking quarterbacks in the next draft class or a new head coach. Now, who do you like, or who do you think are some names out there that could be some strong potential candidates as the next Giants head coach?
So first of all, I'll get that in 1 second. First of all, just about Jaxson Dart, you mentioned, the next guy. Do you think Jaxson Dart is tough to coach? I don't.
Absolutely not.
You know what I mean?
Absolutely not.
I think he's delight to coach. He's smart.
I would love to coach that kid. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could line up the 50 guys right now, and you say you want to go to battle with Jaxson Dart. They'd say, yeah, sure. That's a plus. That's a plus. So I don't think he's tough to coach. No, I think it's important to coach him, certainly. And I would just say that the whole theory out there that the last straw was seeing Jaxson Dart in the medical tent and having a concussion, that there was a recklessness, and that was not part of this. That was not part of. You know what? We have to fire Brian Daboll because he's reckless with Jaxson Dart and he got him hurt. See, now I do think Brian Daboll tried with Jaxson Dart, but publicly he kept on supporting him and saying that it's okay. I can't take that aggressiveness away from him, and I do think Jaxson Dart needed to be reined in a little bit. Now, in the play he got hurt, he's running the ball. He's got blockers in front of him. I mean, there was no, James Illuminor, Dart is just riding his hip and running behind him. There was nothing reckless about that. The ball gets knocked loose. He gets thrown to the ground. He hits his head on the ground. That was a rough physical play. I don't think it was reckless. I think there's other things that were. I looked at Jaxson Dart and I said, look, you're 22 years old. You're not Superman. Yeah. You need to live for another play. So that I don't think, but that's not the reason they fired him. Now, as far as the candidates, I think Mike Kafka is a candidate. I think Mike Kafka has to move himself into candidate status, and this is an audition for him. Do I think he's the front runner? No, I don't know if there's no front runner right now. This just happened yesterday. But Mike Kafka is respected in the building. He will be. He's 38 years old. He will be a head coach in this league at some point. He just will be. He's gotten a bunch of interviews. He's gotten second interviews. He's a smart guy. It'll be very interesting to see how he changes, or if he changes his personality with the players, with the media, if he's more forceful, more stand-up. I thought this year Mike Kafka took a step forward as far as showing us some of his personality. I think having a guy like Jaxson Dart to coach helps, right? It helps to talk about good things that your quarterback is doing.
Absolutely.
So, we'll see how that pans out. Look, here's some names. Jeff Hafley, anyone who watched the game last night, the Packers have a terrific defense. He's a defensive coordinator of the Packers. He's a guy from New Jersey. He's got head coaching experience at Boston College, okay? The Giants have strong ties to Boston College. John Mara, undergraduate, Boston College. Tom Coughlin, head coach, Boston College, right? So there's Boston College connections with the Giants. I'm not saying that's why they would hire him, but Hafley's a guy who I think will be a head coach in the league at some point. I think he is certainly on the list. Jersey, been a head coach. Packers, good defense, certainly makes sense. I'll put Lane Kiffin on the list. He was Jaxson Dart's coach at Ole Miss. He was a failed head coach for the Raiders. What was he? I think 5-15, yep. 2007, 2008. I wouldn't put him at the top of the list right now, but I just don't think you have to go out there and say, oh my gosh, we need to bring someone in for Jaxson. We need to bring in someone that Jaxson is comfortable with. I don't think so. I see Bill Belichick as a picture on our thing. I would take him off the picture. I don't think he's a candidate at all. I don't. We'll see. John Gruden, do I think he's a candidate? No, I'll put him on the list. That's a good picture, Jaxson Dart and Steve Spagnuolo. I think Spags is on the list. He's a great guy. Everyone loves Spags. He is hallowed in the Giants building. Everyone loves him. Everyone loves him in Kansas City. He is a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator. He was not a very good head coach with the Rams. I don't know if they would bring him back for that. He was the interim head coach for the Giants. After Ben McAdoo got fired, he went 1-3. I'm not sure that's a great move right now, but he would certainly be on the list because he has such high regard in the building. Kevin Stefanski, if he leaves from the Browns, he would have been Pat Shermer's offensive coordinator in 2018 with the Giants. Wouldn't that have been interesting with Daniel Jones?
Yep.
But Shermer was blocked from that move, and he couldn't make that move. Okay, you know what? How about Mike Tomlin? Are things running stale in Pittsburgh? Probably. Is he going to, have a lifetime commitment and stay there forever? Maybe, maybe not. Um, is there any Tom Coughlin in Mike Tomlin, a guy who was a great head coach, who maybe is wearing out his welcome and staying too long in his first spot, Jacksonville for Coughlin, Pittsburgh for Tomlin, and the Giants and the Steelers have, the Rooney family, the Mara family are very closely connected. Everyone knows that. Um, Maybe throwing it out there. Cliff Kingsbury doing great things with Jaden Daniels and the Commanders' offense coordinator. 3 years head coach, Cardinals, some good, some bad. He's got head coaching experience. How about Lou Anarumo? Okay, Staten
Okay.
Island guy. He is the Colts defensive coordinator. They're doing great. He's local, and he was the Giants defensive back coach in 2018. A lot of people have high regard for him in the building, and I think that's a good list. I think that's a very good list. The Notre Dame coach, I saw we had a picture of him. You know, um, I think I know there is some high regard for him in the Giants building. Notre Dame head coach fits a very strong profile. Um, Freeman.
Let me
Fans
throw a
say,
couple
what
names
has
to
he
you,
done?
Paul. Let me
Yeah,
let me throw a couple names to you. Wink Martindale,
no.
Antonio Pierce.
Head coach? No, I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I mean, would he get an interview? Is he? You have to remember, it's also who does Joe Schoen have a connection with? Maybe it's
Yeah.
somebody he has no connection with. Um, um, I mean, I wouldn't say no to Antonio Pierce. I think he's not he's front runner right now. Like I said, I don't think there are any front runners right now. I would love to talk to Antonio Pierce if I was Joe Schoen. I mean, he's got a lot of high regard in the building.
Last but not least, Davis Webb.
Head coach? No,
Okay.
no. Offensive coordinator? Depends on who the head coach is. Yeah. Oh,
Okay.
here's one. Here's one I should throw out there. I think there's some. He will be a head coach in the league. Jesse Minter.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay.
defensive coordinator, Chargers, was a tremendous defensive coordinator for Michigan. He is going to be a head coach. Okay, now you see, look in Seattle what they're doing with a young former defensive coordinator, right? Everyone wants, we got to get the brilliant offensive coordinator. We got to get the next guy. He's got to work with our quarterback. You need a leader of men, right?
Yep.
Is your father a leader of men? Do you think?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's what he has to be. I'm sure he's got tremendous acumen as a football mind. You must be a leader of men in college and in the NFL. When you get up there, you must be a presence. You're not a friend. You're not a mentor. You're a leader. Okay. You're a sounding board. You're a shoulder to cry on. You're a guy to get, maybe you get a little swift kick in the butt,
Yep.
but you have to be a leader of men. So a guy like Jesse Minter, I think, is a guy who people around the league look at and say, he will be a head coach. Look, these guys are all wild cards. When
Yeah.
everyone's a wild card. Mike McCarthy is probably not a wild card. You want to bring him in. He's won a Super Bowl, good with quarterbacks, maybe a little long in the tooth. You want to bring him in. He's solid. He'll be representative. He's a class act. Is he exciting? No. Will he be good for Jaxson Dart? Probably. You know, Doug Peterson, will he be good for Jaxson Dart? Probably. So you can go a lot of different directions. Anytime you take a coordinator who's never been an NFL head coach, it is a tremendous leap of faith.
Yeah.
Most don't make it, some do. So who's going to be the owner and the GM to say, you know what, this is the guy. They tried it with Daboll, they tried it with McAdoo. You try it with a lot of people. It often doesn't work, but when it works, it's great.
and you say he has to be a leader of men. Obviously the leader of men in that locker room, but you got to be a leader of a fan base as well when it comes to coaching this team. So
Win. If
win.
you win, the fan base, look no further. Why did he get fired? 2-8, 0-4 in games where they had a lead. It's about winning. They haven't won in 3 years. You can fire everybody, but you can fire a coordinator. In baseball, you fire the pitching coach or the hitting coach, before you do the manager. They decided, look, it's not going to work with Brian. We're not going to have him here after this season. We should do it now. Win. If you win, the fan base doesn't care if you're fat, if you're skinny, if you're emotional, if you look like a monk on the bench. Win the game. It doesn't matter if you're like this and nobody sees your face on the sideline. Win more games than you lose. Win in the clutch. Have a lead in the fourth quarter. Hold the lead. Win the game. Brian Daboll pumping his fist. It's great. I like Brian Daboll. Was it all on him? No, it was not all on him. I will go on the record as saying no. I think he could be a good head coach, but he did not win enough, and he knew. He was not shocked by this. When you lose almost all the time, the change is made. The fans will love you if you win.
Just win, baby. And you know who said that. So that's going to be an interesting coaching search there. But, all right, we're going to wrap this episode up. We'll be at practice on Wednesday. Obviously, Mike Kafka is going to speak for the first time as interim head coach. We're going to go into the locker room, talk to a lot of fans. So there's a lot to look forward to on Thursday's Blue Rush preview show ahead of the Packers game. For Paul Schwartz, I'm Brandon London. Thanks for watching Blue Rush.
Are you a die-hard New York Rangers fan? Do you crave the inside scoop directly from Madison Square Garden and the locker room? Then get ready to go up in the blue seats. Hey everyone, Molly Walker here, your Rangers beat writer at the New York Post, and I am thrilled to be one of your hosts on Up in the Blue Seats. We've got former Rangers favorite Brian Boyle and our Hall of Fame columnist Larry Brooks joining me to break down all the biggest stories. Every week, throughout the entire NHL season, we'll be bringing you exclusive insights, behind-the-scenes stories, and our unfiltered takes on everything happening with your New York Rangers. From game breakdowns to trade rumors, we've got you covered. You won't want to miss a single episode. We'll be talking about the wins, the losses, the big plays, and the big moments that truly define this team. Don't miss a beat of the New York Rangers season. Subscribe and listen to Up in the Blue Seats every week, wherever you get your podcasts.